I remember one of the lines that isn't it ironic that the people who've been most managed and protected by government are the poorest people in America.
All right, very glad to have our next guest. You know why? You know why, Quarter Black?
Why?
I grew up with, I've talked about Thomas Sowell, some people who are huge influencers. When people ask me, when I do these shows, and it's completely unwarranted fame, people ask me for advice, which I'm woefully, completely ill-equipped to deliver. And I tell, particularly young people who are either in the entertainment industry or want to go into media, the book I tell them to read is this next man's biography. Funny enough, not necessarily one of his books that he's written more as more informational, more nonfiction. His actual autobiography, which is called "Give Me a Break." I think you know who it is. JohnStossel.com @John Stossel. Mr. Stossel, thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you for having me.
So I don't know if you know this, but there are two people I credit in my life to making me a conservative. I know you're more libertarian. My father and yourself, because of your segments on 2020 after TGIF. You drafted in behind Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and I was just enthralled.
Your father forced you to watch 2020?
No, he didn't. He didn't. You know what it was? I remember I was a kid, and I remember just thinking, you're anti-authoritarian. And when you jumped into, I don't know if it was the East River was one of your segments. I remember as a kid going, it was a Hudson River? Okay, all right.
Which is a little cleaner than the East River, and the currents are not so strong. So I don't want to claim I jumped in the...
Okay. But I remember as a kid thinking, this guy's effectively a professional smartass. That's what I thought as a kid. And it really, I started looking into John Stossel more, and I used to look forward to it. And if I had to go to bed, I would tape 2020 and the Give Me a Break segments. A lot of people don't know, before kind of when you started actually going on the libertarian path, where a lot of people know you now with this audience, you were a consumer reporter where you reported on kind of scams and charlatans. Explain for people who don't know the history and how that kind of brought you to where you are now.
I'm a stutterer. When I first fell into this TV job, I didn't want to be on the beat with the other reporters screaming questions at politicians. And at the time, people thought of the news as crime, politics, weather, disasters.
Right.
A lot of people still think that way, but that left a huge area for me, the stutterer, to work more slowly at and snip out the stutters, which was consumer affairs and psychology and sociology and science and medicine, so much good stuff. And as a consumer reporter, I figured part of my job was to police businesses that cheated people.
Right.
And I viewed capitalism as most young lefties do, and I graduated college. My professors had taught me that capitalism was okay. It brings us some stuff, but it's largely cruel and unfair, and we need government controls to protect us from the capitalists. And I totally believed that. Bashed businesses, won 19 Emmys from my peers for doing that.
Right.
But gradually saw that the regulation that we consumer reporters called for didn't help. It just made life more complex, made everything cost a little more, and the cheaters kept getting away with it. They're still getting away with it. The people selling the penis enlargers and the burn fat while you sleep pills.
Careful now. We have a lot of sponsors on the show. You don't know who they are. We might have some self-lubricating pocket catheter commercials coming up too. So let's just tread lightly.
Well, see, some of your sponsors may be cheaters, and the clumsy government will never do anything useful about it.
Right.
So then I turned to the trial lawyers, and they were worse. They ripped off the companies they sued and many of their clients and went home with most of the money. And I gradually woke up and became a libertarian. I saw that philosophy that had made sense to me as a kid didn't make sense. I started reading the conservative media. But you conservatives seem to want to go to war with everybody and to want to police the bedroom. I didn't like that either.
Well, hold on. Don't launch me into that. I was just selling self-lubricating pocket catheters. I want to enhance the bedroom activities, and I don't want to go to war with everybody personally. But
okay, this is how it how I perceived it 25 years ago when I was making the switch.
Sure.
And I discovered Reason magazine, and the libertarian philosophy made total sense to me.
Yeah, I know. And I know you do a lot of great work with Reason. And I sort of came into it a little bit later, right? 2020, TGIF. At that point, you were kind of on the libertarian path. I didn't know what a conservative was. You have to understand, as a kid, I just knew that I liked watching you and calling people on their BS, and I inherently was conservative. You know, I started out as an actor really young, and so my dad taught me about taxes. You know, when you're 13, my dad goes, okay, this is your check from Arthur. This is how much is going to go to socialized health care. You learn about it pretty quickly. And I just loved watching your segments, and then I found your biography. And then that was really the first time that I read about somebody who was shunned by his peers exclusively for his point of view. You talk about that, walking through the ABC offices and how you were treated differently once you started sort of going after big government or the concept thereof. Can you explain that a little bit to people who aren't as familiar with it? Because that must have been really tough. Like you said, Emmy winning, these people loved you and respected you, and then all of a sudden, some of them just...
No more Emmys. I have
That's strange.
Once I said government is often the problem, my peers just weren't comfortable with that. And Peter Jennings, when he would see me in the hall, would do one of these.
Really?
As if I was poison to the ABC neutrality because I had a point of view.
Yeah.
I was a conservative.
Yeah. And as we've well seen since then, there's no other point of view at ABC. Everyone is completely neutral.
Yeah, they view themselves as completely neutral. Of course, there should be more gun regulation. Of course, abortion should be legal. It's just the water we live in New York City. And they don't view themselves as having a point of view. I think now that there are MSNBC, Fox, CNN, and people are more aware, oh, I guess I'm on this side or that side.
Right.
But then ABC, they were all on the left, but they thought they were in the middle.
Well, that's kind of what this Trump administration, CNN is a good example. You know, ABC was like where CNN is now. CNN, a lot of people thought Fox is right, MSNBC is left, CNN's down the middle. You and I, as people who work in the industry, know that couldn't be further from the truth, and now they're being showcased for what they are. That goes back to ABC. Did you anticipate that would happen when you sort of made that transition, or did you just sort of learn as you go, like you did with government corruption?
I did not anticipate that. I thought that they would say, oh, yes, you've explained it to me. I agree. I was so naive. Because I wasn't a conservative. To be a conservative at ABC was like being a child molester. That was just evil.
Yeah, no. You'd be better off being a child molester. At least you get a made-for-TV film about you. But this is going to be edited completely out of context. I'm sorry. You've had a long and storied career, Mr. Stossel. Let me ask you this. Do you remember? So I was really nervous the first time we ever met, and I don't know. You probably don't remember our first meeting in person, I would assume.
Yeah, you came up to me in a green room, I believe.
Yes, okay, I did. But before that, I think it was Geraldo Rivera's show, maybe. And I was on the panel with some talking head. It could have been like Bob Menendez. It could have been Lonnie Davis. Could have been Doug Schoen. You know, one of those people at Fox that's like the liberal who was on there for some whatever reason. We were talking about the housing crisis. And they were saying, it's unfair for Americans to lose their house. And I said, on air, I was 22 at the time, I said, you know what's unfair is actually my parents spent wisely and they saved wisely. And now they have the money to put down in a house, but they can't get it because banks aren't giving out loans because of the subprime crisis that was created through government incentives in the first place. I think that's not fair. I think it's not fair to keep those people in the house and keep people like my parents out. And you walked, before we met in the green room, you walked and you told that person, I can't remember who the person was because I was so focused on you, you said, the kid's right. That's what you told the guy. And that was a huge accomplishment for me. Then I met you in the green room, and you told me I talk too much. In that order.
I have no social skills. I kind of blurt out what is in my mind.
But you know what? It was very helpful. You said you talk too much, and I would say, and then you said, "Yeah, I like some." You said, "Stephen, I've seen some of your stuff. It's interesting, but you're on camera talking too much. Show the viewer more. Show them what you're talking about, as opposed to talking." And a lot of that was budgetary at the time. You know, it was me with just back then a flip camera, but it was very blunt, but very constructive, and that's been actually foundational to the way we do this program now. So I thank you for that sting.
Oh, you're welcome. Do I get a cut?
There's really not that much of a cut. That's the problem with the fragmenting media. We do okay. But let me ask you, do you have anything that really sticks out in your mind? Like we asked Thomas Sowell about this, which of his books were his favorite. Do you have any report that you've done at one point or two or three that stick out as your favorites? Because I have one in mind, but I want to hear yours first.
Stupid in America, piece on the education monopoly. My first 2020 special titled, Are We Scaring You to Death? I wanted to call it, We Are Scaring You to Death, but they wouldn't let me. Two lefty producers quit rather than work on that show. And I thought I would be fired. So that may be my favorite because I thought it would be the end of my career, but it rated so well that it was a new beginning for me.
Did that surprise people at ABC that you rated so well?
Yes.
Do you think
they viewed this as, look, we don't agree with you, but we don't want to lose you to NBC. We want this special. Okay. You can only do it if we make an extra hour available, the Nightline time slot, to have other people there to rebut what you're saying. And they assumed that people wouldn't watch it. The executive vice president said, why don't you do the stuff you're good at, like diet and breast enlargement? And I said, I want to do this show. And then they were shocked that it rated well and that scientists would write in and say, finally, someone's saying these things.
Right. I always wonder what they thought at that point, because at that moment in time, there was no new media like there is now. Really, there wasn't really cable news didn't exist in the capacity that it has now for decades. I only knew, and we didn't have AM radio, by the way, in Canada. I would get to pirate it from Plattsburgh, New York, if I was lucky. Yours was kind of that sliver of truth, which was really foundational for me growing up. My favorite one, I don't know if you remember this, was you did a report on Native American reservations on 2020. Do you remember that one?
I remember one of the lines that, isn't it ironic that the people who've been most managed and protected by government are the poorest people in America?
Yes. Well, that's very profound, but I remember your smart-ass remark more when I was a kid, because keep in mind, I remember you sitting down with this guy. Please tell me you remember this, otherwise I'm going to seem like the jackass. You said, you live here with, whenever I do talk about someone, I do an impression of them. It's automatic. You said, you live here with running water and electricity. And the guy said, the white man has made me live this way. And do you remember your response? This is okay. I'll give it, because to me, I remember as a kid, I about peed myself laughing in my living room in a 3-bedroom in Montreal. I said, the white man makes me live this way. And you said, but you're wearing jeans. And I don't know why as a kid, I just thought that boiled the BS down perfectly. It was this First Nations person saying they forced me, and he was wearing Levi's. And it was the highlight of my Friday was watching your segments.
Well, I'm glad. I thought all of America would feel that way, but they didn't.
we quoted that line for every time we'd go past this Native American like you've talked about, and a lot of people don't know this. They really have been crippled by the government. It is I've tried to find it on YouTube and show it to people. It's been pretty hard to find. Some segments are easier to find, some are more difficult, but you really did highlight the fact that, like you said, people who have been given the most help from the government have been ironically crippled by them, and I think that was lost on a lot of people. Maybe you were just ahead of your time. And then you moved over to obviously Fox News, and you kind of, once you were amongst allies, how did that change your life and your career? Did you feel like you could relax a little bit? Did you feel like you missed the hunger, the fight, the conflict a little bit? What was the transition like?
Well, no, the conflict sucked.
Okay.
I wanted to do a piece on Obamacare, and I had all this good material. No, nobody's interested in free market medicine and school choice. The movement was just beginning. They didn't want to air these things. Fox, they loved this stuff, so that was great. It wasn't relaxing because now I had to do an hour show every week, and
right.
It's a different kind of pressure. You're used to it. You're doing long podcasts, but
but I'm not winning any Emmys. Certainly not 19.
I was used to short, edited pieces.
Yes,
and that's what I'm doing again now.
Well, you do them all very well, and now you do a lot of them. We have B-roll right now rolling. I don't think you can just see me of your video on Bernie Sanders and the online empire. Now, I know you work with Reason, but you also have your own YouTube channel. So what's the relationship there exactly? Does this all go on your YouTube channel, or some goes on Reason?
80% of the views are on my YouTube or Facebook channels, 20% on Reason, and donors give to the charity Reason, which then gives me most of that money to make these videos.
And they're very informative, and I appreciate that someone who's had this, 19 Emmys, you said, you've been doing this for so long, is now moving into new mediums. And listen, we need more people out there on YouTube. A lot of conservatives have sort of relegated this territory to the left, a lot of social media, let alone the entertainment industry. And you're one of the few people, this video I particularly like, where you talk about the Bernie Sanders online media empire. We went after Bernie really hard during the election. Let me explain why. And I remember when I was at Fox for a long time, I was telling them they needed to focus on this guy more because Hillary Clinton was going to be the coronation, but Bernie Sanders was the movement candidate. And for people in my generation, it was more important to focus, take the head off the dragon. Not many other people have done that. So what made you want to focus on Bernie Sanders, and what do you mean by the Bernie Sanders online media empire?
Simply because I read an article saying Bernie Sanders is quietly building a internet media empire. And I looked at the numbers and, oh my goodness, he was. And wait a second, that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to explain people that limited government's a good thing. And this idiot is spreading deceit and he's winning.
Yeah.
So I want to do one of my videos on that. I'm doing these videos because my 28-year-old son convinced me, Dad, no one's going to believe what you say about free markets, at least no one in my world, as long as you're on Fox. And you don't need Fox anymore because people are cutting the cords. And you've got 1 million Twitter followers, there's Facebook, there's YouTube. You don't need a network.
Yeah, you don't. And a lot of people, obviously, it helps to be backdoored in with a name like yours, the name recognition, because people can then search you and find you. And so it lends credibility to these mediums. Whereas, a good example, I've talked about this, we had Ralph Macchio on the show, which at one point you'd think, oh, Ralph Macchio, that's back in the 80s. No, the number one show in the world was Cobra Kai on YouTube Red. It was getting 36 million plays. He wasn't appearing on Fox. He wasn't appearing on CNN. He was appearing on this show. Whereas for a long time, we couldn't get people who were appearing on primetime television. And that's how it happens in a moment, sometimes that flip. And we have a lot of young people who do watch what we do. And I know that they'll be big fans of yours. Just make sure you keep the smart assness. That's what made me love you as a 9-year-old. I ended up going the route of comedy, but you were a big force in veering me there.
I'm easily bored, and so I thought to succeed in TV, I have to do smart-ass stuff that makes people laugh.
It absolutely did. Let me ask you this: Are you friendly with Barbara Walters, or can I ask some inside baseball questions?
Both.
Okay.
I mean, hang out.
How did she react to you? Because you would have to sit at that desk and kind of introduce and toss to your segments. It was her and Phil Donahue, I believe, and then he was changed out, if I'm not mistaken. Hugh Downs. Sorry, yeah, Hugh Downs. I got the name wrong. Well, generic white guy name, old guy. How did they react to you? Because you were on air with them, and they would have to grit their teeth and bear it and know the package you were tossing to.
They were friendly and viewed me as. Hugh is kind of libertarian and was sympathetic and would sometimes say, "Well, John, I didn't know that." And Barbara viewed me as kind of an insect that she would tolerate. When we would co-anchor, she's a remarkable person. She's just could have coasted at this point of her career.
Yeah.
But she worried and obsessed about every second of video. If she had a piece on, I knew my piece had to be shorter because she was going to demand that her piece would get more time. And we would sit on the set waiting for the people to fix the lighting, and she was obsessing over this paperwork. I said, "What are you doing?" Man. "I'm taking the seating assignments for my dinner party tonight." And I said, "So intensely?" "Yes, you don't know how important this is."
Wow. Sounds like someone's been taking those late night enlargement pills you were talking about and comparing it.
She had enough to succeed in the man's world that it was when she began.
Yeah. Well, I asked because I know you've always been, like I said, a bit of a smart aleck, but funny, quick, and she's very remarkable in the sense of what she's accomplished, but she doesn't seem to have a sense of humor or a sense of irony sometimes. And is that an incorrect read?
I'm trying to remember humor, but and it's not.
You know what you are to me? You're like the news reporter equivalent to Norm Macdonald. You're okay going into a room and just making people uncomfortable as long as it's truthful. And I've always really, and that, that happened with Barbara Walters and Norm Macdonald. I don't know if you ever saw that on The View, where she got really upset with him. This was when George W. Bush was elected into office, and he was on The View, and we couldn't find this on YouTube for years. They scrubbed it because everyone remembers this clip. I remember who's a Norm fan, and they said, "Well, what do you think as a Canadian? What do you think about the recent election?" And all Norm said, he said, "Yeah, I think George Bush, good guy, and it's a good time to get murderers out of the White House there." And Barbara Walters goes, "Oh, whatever do you mean? Oh yeah, Bill Clinton. Didn't you hear he killed the guy?" And she went to commercial break, and he was not welcome on The View for about 6 years. And I was going, this is Norm. So I could only imagine what the green room was like with her and you. I've always wanted to get some inside stories, but it sounds like you're being tasteful, which I'm not happy about.
It was all professional, and we obsessed about every second, every introduction to every story, and there was not a lot of laughter.
No, I can't imagine. Who was your favorite person, would you say, to work with in your entire career?
I like some of the smart Fox people, Stuart Varney, David Asman, the ones who lean libertarian, Kennedy. Yeah. Those are the people I like working with most.
Yeah, there were a lot of fun people that I remember on Fox Business. I never spent much, but Judge Napolitano was always so nice with me. I don't know why. He was so friendly, and he didn't know me, but he was a very, very friendly guy. And you were semi-friendly, but helpful.
Everybody.
Yeah, well, now I don't feel so special.
Good.
All right, so that is johnstossel.com, the YouTube channel John Stossel, @JohnStossel, for as long as they still allow you on Twitter. Do you have anything coming down the pike specifically that you want people to keep their antenna up for?
We're going to do something on Kavanaugh and freaking out about his being on the Supreme Court. We are working on my charity that puts my videos in high school classrooms, and we have a essay contest, putting the winners on who defend price gouging, which is, as Milton Friedman explains in the video, a good thing because that encourages people to bring supplies to where they're most needed. We just shot a piece on the new Leave 'em Anywhere scooters. First we got the bikes.
Yes, we talked about it on this show, and I'm glad you're finally bringing bird scooters. All the liberal cities that want to go green are banning it solves the problem of urban transportation. It's done now, and they ban it.
And they're fun. They're really fun.
And they're fun, and there are going to be some public square problems because people ride them on the sidewalks and crush old people like me. But weirdly, they're banned in San Francisco.
Yeah.
But they're thriving in Washington, D.C., of all places.
I know. We were in Austin, and we found out that they were trying to ban it because Austin banned Uber for a while. It's the one really liberal city in Texas. And I actually bought, because of that rideshare program, I went out and bought a high-powered, like the 3 times the power electric scooter, wiped out immediately. But they're a lot of fun, and it is amazing. Now I'm going to get off on the topic just because I think these scooters are incredible. You wrote in your book, I think it's Myths, Lies, and Downright Stupidity, Get Out the Shovel While Everything You Know Is Wrong. Did I get that title correct?
You've been paying attention.
It's one of my favorite books. The book that influenced me most was your autobiography. As a young I didn't really know I was conservative. I just wanted to read about you. But that book, I often tell people, is a great reference book. And I
don't even think of it as an autobiography. It was just, it was how I became the scourge of the liberal media after winning Emmy Awards, but it was just sort of a work autobiography.
I don't know. I enjoyed it. But then the Myths and Downright Stupidity, this is a book that's great because you laid it out. And as a matter of fact, it's a big way we format our show with myth and truth, myth and fact. You really did it in a way that I thought was digestible in the book, and you talked about price gouging. If I'm not mistaken, I think you brought up Hurricane Katrina as an example afterward, where people would just go in and buy up all the batteries, and that gouging is a market force to stop people from just going in and saying, all right, I'm getting every single AA because I can't afford to buy every single one. If I'm not mistaken, I remember that example, and that was an aha moment for me because I'd never thought of price gouging.
That's very true. And that's just part one. That's also a market incentive for people to leave their homes and bring batteries to the disaster area.
Right. Yeah. It's one of those things where you say price gouging can actually be a good thing. And people go, okay, I'm pissed. And then you explain it. You lead with the fact that they don't like to hear. And I've talked to, you taught me a lot about that. I talked with my friend Lee Dorn the other day. We did a fact check of Washington Post, 50 claims that they did. And he is a lawyer, and he was going, okay, this is their claim, but here's the context and here's the truth. I said, no. Read John Stossel's book. Read their claim, their direct quote, then just go truth. And then explain the context. People want to hear it on the outset. What's the truth? What's your argument? And then you can give them the details. And he said, oh, okay, that makes sense. So you really do walk that line brilliantly. An intellectual, but someone who makes it available to the masses. All right, sorry, I keep going. I'll talk. I am a fan, a lifelong fan. JohnStossel.com, @JohnStossel. Thanks so much for being here, sir. We really appreciate it. And looking forward to seeing what you do here on the YouTubes.
Thank you, Stephen.
All right, that's about a wrap for today. We'll be back tomorrow with somebody. I don't know who, someone.